Thanks for checking out this episode of Operationally Intelligent, the podcast for people turning observability into business value. I'm Adam Kinneborough, and today we're diving into the world of mobile observability with my guest, Hanson Ho. Hanson's the Android architect at Embrace, a company focused on user-focused observability for mobile and web. Hanson's resume includes time with X, Salesforce, and SAP. Hanson's also an approver for the OpenTelemetry Android SDK, so definitely knows his stuff when it comes to this topic. In the episode, I learned that mobile apps are tricky, data collection is limited, workflows are unpredictable, and user expectations vary wildly. Hanson and I unpack how teams can overcome those challenges by focusing on user-centric monitoring, integrating telemetry into feature development, and using OTel to create a common language across platforms. So if you want to understand your users, improve app performance, and turn observability into real business value, this is the episode for you. Thanks. So, hey, Hanson, thanks for joining me on Operationally Intelligent. Really appreciate you coming in to talk to us today.
Thanks, Adam. Glad to be here.
Great stuff. I mean, I think before we dive into the hot topics, maybe we could just hear a little bit about your background. You've got a pretty cool career. What sort of led you to where you are now?
Yeah, I started doing Android and kind of general performance and reliability stuff when I joined Twitter all those years ago. So I got passionate about collecting data from production because on Android, you have all sorts of weird environments in which the apps operate. So you don't really know what happens unless you actually collect data from production. So a good thing for Twitter, it's got a fairly extensive backend infrastructure for tracing and performance analysis. So we're able to kind of build off of that and get a lot of data. From there, I was able to kind of learn the tricks of the trade about the Android platform, about performance, about mobile weird stuff in general. And I got really into it because things surprise you when you start collecting data from hundreds of millions of devices around the world. And so now I'm at Embrace. We do user-focused observability, which is basically mobile observability. Imagine all these stacks tend to be focused on your data center, how your distributed systems work. Well, for us, it's everything outside the data center because the requests that are being made from mobile devices, well, stuff happens when you get the response, and when things screw up, you want to know about it. And if all you have is backend observability, maybe your uptime is super high, your performance of your backend systems are super good. But if you drop the ball and drop the payload literally on the client side, the user still doesn't see what they want. So user-focused observability and my passion is basically connecting users to your observability in general and make their experience the final arbiter of whether something is successful and performant or not.
Nice. I really like that. I mean, I've got to just get in first and say, surely life would be better if everybody had one of these, right? Instead of all these Android phones kicking about.
Well, if you walk into a stairwell and you have concrete all around you, you lose your connection just as well.
True. Yeah, no, that's fair. Just have to get that in, But yeah, I mean, it seems it's pretty lucky for me in this episode because an area of operational intelligence that I think is really vital, especially sort of thinking about operational intelligence as being, let's say, like an evolution from monitoring through observability. Finally, business teams and tech teams are coming together to realize that they both have data that's sort of vital to each other to understand things going on. I think user-centric monitoring, user-centric observability, as you mentioned, is a huge part of that, right? You've got to know how your users are doing. It's not just about those server metrics anymore. So maybe I guess my first question would probably be, sort of, why does mobile observability sort of seem hard? I mean, you hinted already at sort of like signal loss, that kind of thing. It seems like it's obviously going to be pretty critical these days with so many apps are sort of mobile first or mobile centric at least. So why is it harder today? Why is it more critical than ever?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons and well, more than a couple, but the main one, frankly, is that we're not used to actively collecting data on production for mobile apps. Because you look at a lot of mobile app developers, they may be a small shop with one or two people. They don't have the backend infrastructure to take in telemetry. They don't have a way to stand up dashboards to look at the stuff. So what they get are effectively what the platforms provide, and that tends to be crashes. So if you go to the Google Android Vitals dashboard, you see what Google wants you to see, which is, oh, here's some crashes and here's some ANRs and things like that. And that's okay. It'll catch like the really big things that happen. Like if your app is crashing at startup, well, it'll tell you. But if the errors are more subtle or they're about performance, and only performance for a certain segment of people, you don't get it. Because, and that's just like the way it is for mobile. If you can't stand up infrastructure to collect this data and display this data, it's not used. So the first hurdle to go through is not really technological. It's how do you do instrumentation, that is durable and not flaky and not like super broken if you do some refactoring. The architecture of apps are also different. You don't control the entire workflow. You don't control the threads that you run on. You control a specific module and you do certain things and other things do other things. So the fact that you can't own the entire workflow from start to at the end makes instrumentation extra brittle. So the challenge is, and I didn't talk about like what I usually talk about, which is, hey, getting data back from a mobile device may be a bit hard. Sometimes you're in the forest somewhere jogging and you don't have data, you don't have internet connection. So you got to make sure things are, cached and sent when it's available. Where do you do it? How do you do it? How do you do it more efficiently? What if you have 2G connections? What if there's back pressure? There's a whole sorts of environmental issues that just make capturing data challenging. Along with the fact that it's just, we're not used to doing it on mobile, makes it, oh, okay. You got to convince people a little bit by showing value.
Are there additional challenges over, say, your typical sort of like web app monitoring? You've got the device to think about, right? Like not everybody's rocking the latest flagship phone. And not every app can therefore just like hammer home data. It can't be storing tons of data. It can't be using tons of CPU. Is that a big challenge in mobile?
That is the balance of overhead, not only in delivery and persistence in the back end, and making sure that you don't actually make things slower by trying to measure whether things are slow is incredibly big challenge, just because of, especially on Android, the devices range in quality, and also the operating system will also throttle you without any sort of warning. So you have the same hardware spec, you have the same app, but suddenly these things are slower. Why? Well, it's because your OS decided, oh, you have Spotify playing in the background, so you have less resources. So I'm just gonna, throttle you or give you, schedule your things just a little bit later or on a lower end core. So your benchmarks, you can do what you can to measure performance with your controlled environments, but you don't really know how customers are actually using the app, and unless you have data from the, and again, as you said, you don't want to overcollect because you don't want to like add to the burden. So how much is enough, and how much should you get? These are all very important factors to consider.
Yeah, I guess as well in especially in sort of the Android ecosystem. I mean, there is potential for like a huge amount of fragmentation between devices, OEMs, OS versions. It's like, it's pretty straightforward to just say like, well, it's like Safari on an iPhone, right? Or it's like, it's an app on an iPhone, or it's, a browser on, desktop browser. Is that as big a problem as it kind of sounds in my head? From like, I'm sitting here looking at like an old like Samsung Galaxy on my desk that's like 15 years old now. Like, good luck, to any app developer.
It is, but I would say it exacerbates an existing problem. So even if you can lock down the OS version, the runtime environment changes all the time. So even if you have the same device, it could be different. Different users use devices differently. Expectations are also different. So what is slow to me may not be slow to you. So objectively, maybe the request is fast, 1 second, or like, it takes everything to process 1 second. For somebody who's used to things being even faster, well, that's just not good enough. And for someone who's used to things being a lot slower, 1 second sounds great. So you can't even use well, you can use certain rules of thumb to say what is good and what is bad. But if you want to have data that's sensitive to your specific scenario, you have to have something a little more bespoke. You have to understand your user base and what they feel is fast and slow, which is why measuring the absolute value of operations is the first step. But whether the user actually got value from that workflow, whether they quit in the middle, that's the key. That's where user focus comes in, where it's not about the absolute magnitude of performance. It's about the result of said performance. If you can control everything else and vary whether something takes 1 second or 10 seconds, well, you're going to have a bigger drop off in the 10 seconds. And that delta is where performance matters. The delta is what you can actually measure if you have an experimental platform to basically say, I got my A and I got my B. One is artificially slower and one is just regular speed. What happens? What's the difference?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. And I guess one thing, you mentioned sort of signal drop off. You're running in the forest, that kind of thing. Squared Up is the app I'm very passionate about. Given that it's where I work, and it's I spend a lot of time with my head in our telemetry, not only what we collect, how we're collecting it, what we're doing with it, that sort of thing. And I very quickly became like very untrusting of client-side telemetry because it's very easy for a browser to block it, right? It's very simple to say, well, like this is some immeasurable subset of our users because firewalls block it, privacy extensions block it. But our server-side, well, our serverless backend tracking coming from AWS is foolproof, right? We get it. It's our app. There's nothing in the way. And I can trust that data. So we always try to take back-end telemetry as the real golden signals. The front end is the more sort of indicative, right? Sampled in effect. I guess like that's fundamentally how you have to think about mobile telemetry as well, right? You can't think about it as the absolute user base.
You don't need to is the important thing. So you have to kind of live with the fact that you're gonna get some loss, as long as that loss is not skewing the data. So obviously, if you're losing signal from a particular Samsung version, then your sample is polluted because it's not random. But the idea is that on mobile, you're not measuring one system. You're measuring n number of devices, which are mini systems. So yes, you may be missing certain things from certain people, certain uses, but if the problem is important enough, it should bubble up into one of the ones that you do get again, which is why the pipeline, the rock solidness of that pipeline is so important, because you're not going to get 100% ever, because users can clear the cache. As you said, firewalls, you just have to reduce the amount of loss that is preventable and just assume that there is an amount that is not. Because at the end of the day, what does P95 tell you? P95 tells you, basically the 95th percentile, or rather, there's 95% of operations that run faster. But for a particular user, if they're always slow, they're going to always be in the lower percentiles. So the number, the P95 is a good benchmark, but it is a bit of a trivia. So what's important is understanding where users are falling down, and we do that in aggregate, and then we basically drill in and to figure out what is happening in that usage. Like you can diff different app versions, you can diff different conditions. Observability come in. Where are the differences between these two things? And then you could look at the user timeline and take a look at what happened before and after. And there's a code change to a component. The credit card module isn't working, so the user isn't able to add a new credit card and then pay for it. So they get there and they're a new user, and it's like, oh, sorry, I can't add anything. So they abandon. You measure not only performance, because performance obviously is part of it, but you measure when things are broken in subtle ways that do not send telemetry back to you. And it doesn't tell you exactly where it is, but certainly reduces the surface area of investigation.
Mm-hmm.
This is often an issue on mobile, because when you have an issue, on the back end, well, you tell the on-call for the owner of the service and say, hey, your thing is wrong. Figure out what's going on. On mobile, there could be 3 or 4 different culprits, depending on what layer the failure is happening at. So to be able to reduce the scope of investigation and what you need to actually look at is massive in terms of reducing the amount of time it takes to investigate an issue.
Yeah. So that sort of context is absolutely vital, as well as the data itself. It's understanding the context behind it. Nice.
Definitely.
Okay. Mm. So, I mean, given that, I guess without that context, you can very easily find yourself sort of hitting dead ends when you're trying to figure out a problem. You might reducing that scope, like you say, is kind of vital. How does mobile observability sort of evolve into something of more actionable? Like what we might call operational intelligence.
Yeah. So on mobile, you basically collect telemetry for 2 reasons. One is to surface problems, one is to investigate problems. And I think traditionally folks have been using production telemetry to investigate problems, give you the exemplar that is difficult to reproduce. But where it applies to operational intelligence and observability in general is collecting this data in aggregate allows you to slice and dice. So you're able to know um, conversion rate for a certain workflow is normally 85%. Suddenly it's dropped to 80%, and it's all usually very consistent. It may change, day to day, depending on, what day of the week it is, and different types of users use it in the evenings and things like that. So there are cycles, but you're like, 5% drop is humongous. And we just did a deploy, or not deploy. We just released a new version. So you can match the timeline and say, hey, because, on mobile, versions are very discrete. So you can actually tell what app version, produces telemetry. So to be able to look at, oh, this version is where it went down, or look at things like that don't relate to version, things like geography, and things like that. Then you're able to basically do your typical slice and dice of data like you would for the backend, but instead of looking at how a distributed system is performing, you're looking at the aggregate number of users that are failing and succeeding. And just because of the law of large numbers, if you have 50 million DAU, 10 million DAU, even like a few 100,000, you're able to basically notice a statistically significant drop off for a workflow that has been very consistent. Now, it could be code, it could be something else, and which is where the data comes in. If you're able to tell that the drop off is because I don't know, suddenly you released your app in a new market. So a bunch of new users kind of, got brought in, and they have different characteristics. Maybe you've expanded to rural areas. So suddenly networks are on average worse. You see a drop and you're like, what the hell is happening? I didn't release a new version. And having this data will you answer this question, because you may not at instrumentation time specifically say, hey, what about these specific conditions? I want to ask that question. The data allows you, and with enough context, to ask question afterwards. So the data can tell you what's going on if you record enough context. And now there's a balance between how much context and how much data, and et cetera, et cetera. But on mobile, the final thing is whether a user did the thing or not. And if you're able to measure that, everything else becomes effectively data that tells you, narrows down the issue for you. So to start off with, simply measure your highest at the highest level, success or failure. And then, if you or if you're so inclined, go and add more context, add more workflow specific details to help you make the investigation faster. But the fact that you're tracking success allows you to understand and discover problems. And this is where SLOs and things like that come in. Once you have a benchmark and you're able to say, hey, I know this shouldn't fall below 85%, and then suddenly it is over a certain period of time. It's on a blip. What's going on? And then you can go back and investigate.
I guess with maybe a sort of a differentiator in the challenge of the mobile app as well is they tend to be quite sort of specific in their purpose. An app like Squared Up, for example, is a big complex analytics tool. There isn't a mobile version of it. You can use it on a phone, sure, right? But there isn't a mobile app, and most of the mobile apps I use do one thing, right? They let you post a tweet, they let you check your bank account balance. That workflow is probably the key workflow that the app serves. And so I guess the impact on your user base if something is wrong and it's widespread, that's why it becomes like just super important for the business, not just technically, because I guess the ability to massively reduce the sentiment people feel towards your product and for them to just jump to some competitor's app really quickly is disastrous in some cases.
Yeah, a lot of apps have low stickiness. If you're doing ride sharing or food delivery, if one doesn't work, the other one does. And I don't have brand loyalty. I have brand loyalty to the restaurant, but and I have brand loyalty to getting where I want to get to. But most people are like, hey, if this app is slow, I can choose another app. Things like banking, there's less incentive, I suppose, because you're not going to switch banks because your mobile app kind of sucks. But it depends how badly, I suppose.
Sure.
But certainly for consumer facing apps, retail, it's huge. Amazon famously have lots of research on web about how much conversion they lose if latency is reduced or rather increased, and that's typically just network requests. Well, the latency the user sees is actually not related, or not directly related to just network requests. If your parsing took twice as long, you can get that 100 milliseconds, 200 milliseconds, delay. And on mobile, we're actually talking a lot worse than milliseconds. It could be seconds. So on a low end phone, serialization, deserialization, it could take a couple of seconds for giant payloads. So not knowing this means you are measuring important things like network latency, but the bigger chunk, the bigger monster behind it is more impactful. And some of them are just low hanging fruit. If you've never measured what it's like in production, how do you know what it even is? Like, benchmarking only goes so far, and I think production data really tells you what happens in the wild.
I guess you've probably got some good stories from sort of seeing your customers, the customers that use Embrace, maybe sort of like catching an ANR spike before sort of like widespread release, or, there's probably some really cool cases I can see where like customers will really understand the value of a product like yours because of the potential for these like disastrous things to happen.
Yeah, typically, because our production requires, data collected from mobile apps require significant adoption in order to get statistically significant changes for performance. Typically, you catch things after the fact. So you can have your beta releases, your dog food releases that will catch disasters, because it becomes a little more sensitive if the magnitude of change is great. But typically, folks find issues when they release. But on mobile, if you don't know that your things are, for the general audience, it's 20% slower, you wouldn't be able to actually figure out that, oh, we made a change that impacted certain types of customers or certain types of phones. So the ability to do that allows you to go and say, hey, this is unexpected, what's going on, and fix it. And you fix it by releasing a new version. It takes time. So one thing about mobile observability is that don't expect immediate results in terms of data coming back in, because phones, in the forest example, telemetry sometimes just comes back late. So don't expect to, unless it's like, crashes and certain things, disasters, almost immediately. But more subtle changes is like a 10% reduction in certain segments with certain types of cores, or not enough cores. If you're just doing more parallel things in your app startup, you're not going to be able to tell until you run out of cores, and you're basically blocked on a thread. So that's the type of thing that it's difficult to tell with benchmarking, simply because you're not going to test all those weird ass scenarios.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Nice. What is I guess of just for personal interest, of what is Embrace's, I guess, of general like philosophy on mobile observability? What are like the key pillars, the most important things you'd pitch to a customer if they were considering something like Embrace?
Well, the most important thing really is being user focused. The notion that we are not capturing simply the execution of the process and how long it took for the CPU to run, how much memory. That is evidence, but what it really matters is the ability to track whether users we're able to get value. So we just released a new feature called user journeys, which basically allows you to track, funnel fall offs. So similar to product analytics, but tying it to performance, and explain to you why certain conversion rates are slower, or at least give you context and give you the differences before and after, and also, what types of things are slow and exemplars and things like that. And, it's a small tweak to understanding of what a trace or a span is, because, it's two data points, right? And some metadata. But to actually look at that and say, this is what I'm focused on, I don't really care how long it took for the request to come back. What I really care about is did the user succeed, and measuring that. I think that's our whole philosophy, is being able to do
Mhm.
that on OpenTelemetry, especially given that oftentimes it's very useful to link backend data with data from mobile, and the ability to basically all speak OpenTelemetry allows you to, you know, increase the context you have in the backend if you're able to kind of segment by attributes that are captured on the front end.
Yeah.
The
I know you're sort of personally quite involved in the OpenTelemetry project. You're an approver for the Android SDK, I believe. So, what's the significance of open standards when it comes to mobile observability?
I think with like all observability, the ability to like speak the same language to different people, in this case, vendors, instrumentation, and applications. The ability to not silo yourself and tie yourself to a specific vendor, a specific API, allows you more choice in terms of where you get your instrumentation from, what types of SDK you use, and ultimately what you can do in the backend when you get the data. I think one of the things I think is most important for OpenTelemetry is the fact that it's got semantic conventions, which basically tells you and describes, the schema of these signals you're capturing. So you're able to tell that this isn't just a span; it's a span that represents a network request. So once you have an understanding of what is going on, what that span represents, you can start doing different things to it, especially in the UI. And you're able to more succinctly and knowing what the underlying data is, be able to kind of figure out, what's important and what's not. And that type of standard is critical, because you don't want to tie yourselves to a specific vendor in terms of your dashboarding, in terms of your data processing or whatever. Or ideally, you don't want to. If you have tons of money, you want to spin up your entire stack, go ahead. If you want to throw 100 people in your observability and you're able to afford that, you don't need a standard, because you don't need anybody else. But most of us don't want to build everything on our own. And we want to basically share in the collective knowledge and sweat of
Hmm.
other people. We do things and everybody benefits. It may be a bit idealistic, and it probably is, in this world where making money is the most important thing, but it's also a good, way to spread the importance and the gospel of observability. Is you get a bigger community. You're not just saying, hey, buy my thing. You're saying this is important and this is a standard, that we adhere to. You may not agree with how we do things. Well, go ahead and implement your own instrumentation. Go ahead and implement your own distribution. You don't have to start from scratch. And the ability to not start from scratch and leverage existing, functioning and battle tested code is what OpenTelemetry is all about. I mean, at the end of the day, Ollie is infrastructure. You don't want to really build infrastructure if you can just use somebody
Yeah,
else's that fit your requirement.
yeah, absolutely. Do you think as well that, I mean, I guess you have those people who may have their sort of like, say, like enterprise observability hats on, who may not see mobile observability as a sort of first class citizen in that world, right? It's not the data center, right? It's just the client devices out somewhere in the world. Do you think by having that sort of um, that adherence to open telemetry, to being part of a standard, to playing really well with all these other tools, do you think it helps to sort of elevate the status of mobile observability?
I hope it reduces the friction
Sure.
of consumption. So if nothing else, you already have collectors set up, that you can take the data in. You already have tooling that visualizes a span. So you don't have to, if the example I said earlier on, your mobile team is not used to collecting production telemetry, but your backend team is. Well, if you have a bespoke standard or your data is locked in some other vendor's database, you can't really. You have to basically start from scratch as if you have nothing to build on. But if you use OpenTelemetry and your backend SREs are already very familiar with it, your Ollie team is familiar with it, you got tooling. Well, this is just data that's a little bit different. And now to get full value, you may have to do a few different things in terms of visualization and processing and all that stuff. But it gives you you're on this is an American analogy. You're on third base, and you're at the penalty spot, and all you have to do is you and the keeper, and you have a 75% chance of scoring. It's much easier than having to like play out from the back and basically get the ball from your keeper up to the other side. So you're on third base is essentially what you are.
Sure. Yeah. I get it. That's good analogy in I think in any language. So that's fine. What would be just to sort of bring us towards sort of the end of the episode? What would be your advice for, say, like mobile teams just starting out on their Ollie journey? Apart from buy Embrace, obviously.
Buy Embrace is good. Free trial, blah blah blah. Click the link, like and subscribe. Oh, that's
Sure.
just for you. But just play with it. And don't try to do too much. Sometimes engineers overcomplicate things and be like, oh yeah, I want to capture everything. If I can't get everything and all the details, it's useless. How about you just capture the most important workflow? Start from the beginning and then stop it when it finishes successfully and see what that does. See what that number is. You might think it's 99%, but it's not. Using a vendor like Embrace or somebody else allows you to not have to set up your own infrastructure, which is like a very hard part for mobile teams. You can just basically go in there, load the SDK, and you get to see your data. More sophisticated integrations can happen afterwards, but I think getting the hello world, a useful hello world in is what I always suggest. If you've ever, as a product manager or a manager of a team, had somebody tell you, hey, performance is bad and our conversion has dropped because our product analytics is telling us that, and you're like, I have no idea what happened. If you're able to kind of like have some telemetry around it and be able to contextualize it, they may not have to come and tell you. You can tell them, oh look, conversion has fallen off the cliff, and this is what the issue is. I fixed it before you noticed in your monthly reports. So this is where we show ROI. This is where we show value, because it's very easy. I'm sure the product managers all know if conversion drops by 2%, what that does to the business. If you're able to tell them proactively and tie it back to how your app operates, that's a golden ticket.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess it's a sort of going too big with no real intent is what inevitably leads to sort of leaders seeing observability tools as just like big sinkholes for money, right? Like storing data, everything's too expensive. We're not getting any value from it. So I think that's probably like, some pretty good advice is to just focus on that key thing that's going to make a difference to you. Are there any other like big, obvious, dumb mistakes people often make when it comes to instrumenting mobile apps?
Well, I wouldn't say they're dumb mistakes. I think it's harder to recover when you make a mistake in instrumentation, just because it takes time for you to release and detect and then remedy. And even when you have a code up, fix in, it may take time for the new version to go out. So be more vigorous in your testing, in your validation, that the telemetry is correct. There are tools that you can use to basically tell you, whether you're getting expected or not. And Embraces, we're on the roadmap is something that's, that will help in that. But you can do it yourself. Just make sure your telemetry is recorded appropriately in all the various scenarios. Don't treat it as simply instrumentation. It doesn't matter. Treat it as if it were part of the feature. When you have acceptance tests to basically say, hey, when I do conversion, I should really, have this request submitted and validated. Well, you should add telemetry to that. Like I should really fire, an event or close a span or whatever it is. That's the biggest tricky part is to basically just make sure that your data is correct because you can't
Mhm.
just fix it with a new deploy like you would a backend.
Yeah, nice. So good data, meaningful data, things that put the user first. That's kind of how you bring, I guess, of mobile observability into that world of like operational intelligence, because it suddenly feels valuable to everybody to be able to see it. Right, well, that definitely answers my question about what the heck it all is. Um, Final sort of quick fire question: what's your what's your favorite sort of open source tool right now? What should I be looking at? What should I be checking out these days?
Well, I mean, I think your audience may differ, from what I focus on, but I mean, one of the best tools that I think you could use on Android is Leak Canary. It allows you to detect leaks. Often it's too expensive to actually do in production, but memory leaks are sometimes structural, and being able to detect that proactively is incredibly helpful. Leak Canary is free. Uh, it's great if you're not using it to analyze your apps and to see if there are fall offs. You really should.
Yeah, nice. Okay, yeah, good one. Is there any are there any sort of like interesting trends, either sort of directly in mobile observability or in observability sort of more broadly, that you're pretty excited about at the moment?
Well, I mean, we've spoken about OTel. I think the emergence of OTel in the last couple of years has been fantastic. It allows us a common platform to talk to people with. But I think more and more justifying the existence of engineers have become a hot topic. And one way to doing that is to have data around your reliability. And if you're not collecting data from mobile apps in a way that you can directly connect to the ROI or specifically like conversions and things like that, you're just based on vibes, in terms of like how much you're contributing or not. And I would also want to flip it as not a thing to prevent, but a thing that you could optimize. So people always want to like prevent regressions, which is super important. But what if you can change your baseline from 80% to 82% to 83%? You're bringing value in a way that
Mm.
is on mobile, especially. A lot of PMs come up with, hey, this feature will get us extra 100 million DAU or whatever revenue. They can't prove it because there are so many factors. When you release a feature 6 months down the line, how can you directly tie it to that? With performance, you can, because you'll see the numbers change before and after release, because everything is the same. The features are all the same. The
Hmm.
difference is it's faster, and be able to tie that directly performance, especially for a performance engineer on these mobile teams who are focused on trying to justify, hey, I'm just working on perf. Maybe people don't think me as vital. Well, if you can improve the conversion rate, improve performance in a demonstrable way, this is a way for you to get not only job security, but promotions and
Yeah.
and everything.
Yeah, that's a really interesting side of sort of operational intelligence I hadn't really thought about yet. So maybe I have to dig into that in another episode around, yeah, how these things tie into sort of even broader business insight around, yeah, workforce value, performance, that sort of stuff. That's yeah, pretty cool takeaway.
Yeah,
Yeah,
aligning the incentives of your developers in the front line with the business ensures that you're marching to the beat of the same drum, and that is often you're just do as you're told is not great motivation. But if I improve performance that helps the company and my own goals, then hey, you don't have to motivate. The goals are there to motivate.
yeah, yeah. Nice. Okay. Well, yeah, I think that's yeah been a great chat. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Yeah, thanks for stopping in. Obviously, to everybody listening, check out Embrace. Focus on your mobile observability. Check out Hanson's work on OpenTelemetry. But yeah, thanks again for stopping in.
Always, I'd love to talk about this stuff.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, cool. Well, catch us on another episode soon. But yeah, thanks for that. Bye.
Thank you.